This is part 2 of our early civil rights leaders, and we're examining John and Eugenia Burns Hope, and we'll also be discussing Alonzo Herndon in part 2. The Hopes were educators who worked to advance civil rights. John Hope was the first black president of Morehouse College, which, if you're not familiar with Morehouse, is only for African American males today. And so he's the first black man to be president of that university, which was for only African American males. So it's kind of ironic that it took until 1906 to have someone of the same race to be president of that university. Kind of a sad state. He later becomes president of Atlanta University, which later merges with Clark University and forms Clark Atlanta, which is a predominantly African American university in Atlanta. Mr. Hope supported public education, health care, job opportunities, recreational facilities for African Americans. He was a member of the Niagara movement that we talked about that was founded by Du Bois, the NAACP, and also the Commission of Interracial Cooperation. The Hopes moved to Atlanta in 1898 for John to take the position at Morehouse. Miss Hope became a member of a group working to start daycare centers in what's was known as the West Fair community of Atlanta in 1898 and 1899. She was also very active in many other organizations. She formed the Neighborhood Union with core members of the West Fair community, and it was the first women's charity group in Atlanta. She was elected chairperson of the Women's Civic and Social Improvement Committee for Better Black Schools in Atlanta. Became the founding member of Atlanta's National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, served as the director of the YWCA, Hostess House program for black soldiers, and that was during World War I. She was appointed on President Hoover's Colored Commission, and she became the first vice president of the NAACP Atlanta chapter. Now, the last person we're going to talk about is Alonzo Herndon. You're also going to have a video to watch about him on Edmodo and a quiz to take after that video, so pay attention to Herndon. You'll get some details about him here as well. He was born into slavery in 1858, but after the Civil War, his white father sent him and his slave mother, younger brother, maternal grandparents, his mother's parents, who were also slaves, away. They were homeless and jobless, so they became sharecroppers, and they were still very poor after 3 years. He wrote about his early life, and here's a picture of him with his mother and brother around 1890, that his mother was emancipated when he was 7 years old, and his brother Tom was 5. She was sent adrift in the world with her 2 children and a corded bed and a few quilts. She hired herself out by the day, and as there was money in the country, she received as pay potatoes, molasses, and peas, enough to keep them from starving. So he grew up very, very poor as a slave and then later as a sharecropper. They had so little in life. But then he moved from the countryside to Atlanta, where he learned to become a barber. And this is Atlanta as it's growing after the Civil War. You can see the remnants of burnt out buildings and things, and they're rebuilding the city. And here is what becomes known as the Crystal Palace on Peachtree Street. And this was Herndon's barbershop. And notice that all the barbers are African Americans, but all of the patrons are white. African Americans actually were not allowed to come into the Crystal Palace and get their hair cut by any of those barbers. And so Herndon becomes a very wealthy man being a barber. And he has multiple barbershops similar to this one that you see in the image. In fact, this barbershop, the building that it's in, still exists on Peachtree Street in downtown Atlanta. I think it's a Subway restaurant now, but if I remember correctly. So the building still exists, but it just doesn't look anything like this anymore. And it was just a gorgeous building where very affluent white males would come and get their hair cut and get a shave. And this is Herndon's other business. He formed Atlanta Life Insurance Company, which made him a millionaire. So he was a very wealthy man and did very well for himself considering what his background was and how he had grown up. And this is around 1925. So he did, like I said, did very well for himself in life. His wealth and business position brought with it social responsibility, and the African American community looked to him for leadership. So he worked with people like Washington and Du Bois, and that he kind of influenced some of their ideals and their beliefs and much of the society of Atlanta at the time. Herndon also was part of the National Negro Business League and the Niagara Movement. And here is a picture of Herndon's home. It still exists today. You can call and schedule like private tours, but it's not open for public tours much anymore because they just don't have the draw of people coming to it like they used to. But it's a very beautiful home. I will say that it's in somewhat of a rundown area of town. Across the street from it are just kind of shacks and rundown buildings and things like that. I've been there before, but the home still is very beautiful, and they do keep the grounds looking just like what you see in this picture. That is the end of our video series on the early civil rights leaders. Make sure you've completed the note sheets, and just like with the last series on the Progressive Era, I will be checking those off in class.